first of all, I'm just going to let each of these guys introduce themselves very quickly. Just, guys, please talk about who you guys are, what regions you guys are focused on, and maybe, you know, your investment model in your accelerator fund, whatever your slice of, I guess, pie is. So please start.
Okay, so my name is Stefan Ganchev. I'm from Bulgaria, Sofia. So we run a micro-seed fund hybrid as an accelerator, a bit, but not exactly, called Launch Hub. We exist for the last 2 years. We did around 40-ish investments. And we operate in Southeastern Europe, so we invest from everything from Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, Greece, Romania, and of course Bulgaria. Like half of the portfolio companies are Bulgarian.
Hello, I'm Ramez Mohammed, the CEO of Flat6 Labs. Flat6 Labs started in Egypt 3 years ago, and now we position ourselves as a MENA-based accelerator where we exist in 3 markets. We launched in Saudi last year, and we launched this week actually in Abu Dhabi and the UAE, our 3rd accelerator. And we plan to roll out more accelerators in the next few years in the MENA region. Flat6 Labs model is very similar to, like, you know, the US-based accelerator model where we have 2 cycles every year, 10 companies per cycle. We give them seed funding of around $20,000 to $50,000 each for 10 to 15% of equity, and many other services we provide to them, like mentorship and training and startup perks. We invest in everything in Egypt, like across the spectrum in innovation, technology, ICT, solar energy, everything. In Saudi, it's mainly technology and digital. In the UAE, it would be media and digital.
So hi, my name is Gary Stewart. I'm originally from the US, but now based in London. I work with a company called Wyra, which is an accelerator basically paid for by Telefonica. We have 14 academies in about 12 countries around the world, usually focused in Latin America and in Spain. To date, we've invested in about 500 startups, and our model is that we invest 40,000 euros normally in exchange for between 5 to 10% of the company.
Mike Butcher from TechCrunch. I think I'm on this panel because I'm going to disagree with everybody on stage. And also, well, just for fun, I helped start a co-working space in the UK called Tech Hub, which is not an accelerator, but does similar kinds of things, I suppose.
So my first question, guys, do you think there are too many accelerators in this world? There's so many popping up, different slices, different countries, different verticals. Are we over, like, have we hit peak accelerator, or is there still room, or is there still innovation to be had here and stuff like that? So if anybody wants to go with it first, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I can start. Actually, I think that at least in Europe, for sure, there are, I think, too many accelerators, and too many of them backed by EU money. So this is kind of a, I don't know, European policy to, they found the accelerator model very, very interesting and very useful. Now we're going to do accelerators in every country. It's amazing. On the other side, it's good that we have them in Europe because, like, for example, if we take as example Bulgaria, before us there was nothing. So it was really something that boosted the local entrepreneurship ecosystem. So there are pros and cons for sure. And the other thing is those corporate accelerators. I think a lot of companies also, I mean, some companies that don't even have traditionally anything related with startups started doing accelerators. Like I was speaking to a Bulgarian TV station. They were like, oh, we're going to do an incubator/accelerator.
Okay, well, I mean, what I would say is it's a complicated question because it really depends on the geography. So, for example, if we're in Lebanon, and we are in Lebanon, then I would imagine that the answer would be no, there probably are not too many accelerators. I think that there are, a lot of time when we're analyzing this question, we analyze it from a kind of US or even London-based perspective and assume that we can extrapolate worldwide about what's happening in those ecosystems. I think that there are a lot of places in the world where entrepreneurship is just developing, and sometimes it can be a bit kind of disheartening to have people say, on a global basis, that there are too many accelerators. And I would say, even in markets like the US or the UK, as long as there's complete transparency and people have the ability to do their due diligence, the market will decide if there are too many or too few accelerators.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with this. Like, we were pretty much the first startup accelerator in Egypt, a country of like 90 million people and huge talent. And up till this moment, there are like 2 or 3 accelerators in Egypt. and we are the largest one so far. So I think for this market, for the MENA market, and we are the first in Saudi and the first in Abu Dhabi as well, there are very few ones in Dubai. So I think, yeah, I think this region needs more accelerators. I think it's a good model for investment. It's mainly like the definition of accelerator and how we see it. I don't think that the accelerator is just like, that it's a program. It's mainly an early stage investment vehicle where you give access to funds and connections and know-how to startups in the early stage who have ideas and they don't know how to start. So it mainly depends on how you define accelerator versus incubator versus any other similar programs. But after all, it's just an opportunity for someone with an idea or in the early stage to start and kick off their business.
I think there are far too many accelerators at this point, and I think that actually there's going to be a shakeout in the next 18 months, 2 years. Frankly, basically accelerators are just a function of the market because especially in Europe and especially in emerging markets, there's no natural clusters. So people naturally gravitate towards something where you can get together with a group of people and then tear strips off each other and sort of knock each other into shape. But as ecosystems develop, and you see this in the Valley, the ecosystems devolves down to the individual. So the individuals you don't wake up in the morning in San Francisco and go, oh, I'm going to go and join an accelerator. You wake up in the morning and go, I've got an idea, I'm going to call my friends, get them round, and we're going to try and build this company. And then I'm going to find access to money and access to networks, and off we go. And that's because that cluster is 50 years old. Your brother and your uncle next door is a damn VC. So that's been going on for years. Accelerators is just a function of the fact that the world is catching up, and at some point they will fall away. They're only really about a handful of accelerators actually being worthwhile joining. One is Y Combinator, where your valuation is virtually $10 million before you've even built a product. And maybe I could name barely maybe less than 5 globally. But it doesn't mean to say that the rest of them are bad. It just means I think it's a function of where we are right now.
Yeah, the top ones are magnitude better, right? And actually, I think it's partially not only because it's a function of who's running it, right? The best accelerators have like 1 or 2 people that just have amazing gravitas, are super well connected, and like live and bleed for their startups, right? So, and like I think that the more accelerators, the better. The thing is, are there actually enough good people around the world to actually go out there and run these accelerators? That's my biggest question, because I'm seeing more people entering the game now that have no business running an accelerator, and they come in with bad terms. They're not even, they don't have any entrepreneurial experience. They come with like a very, bad slant, and they go and give bad terms to the companies. Like, I think that's a big problem.
What's the worst terms you've seen?
The worst terms I've seen. I mean, the ones I've seen is like, people put in like, they'll put a decent amount, they'll actually maybe put like more than the typical 25K, they'll put a couple $100K, but then they own more than 50% of the company, right? And you're like,
that's just bullshit.
And you're like, how the fuck is this company gonna move on, right? Like, it's just toxic. Me as like an investor would follow on later, I would never touch that, because
why would an investor even do that in the first place? It's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Because they're greedy bastards, I think, right? So,
well, I think though the question though would become, there are only a handful of really good investors, probably. There are only a handful of really good startups. By definition, it's a kind of, very difficult business. So I guess the question would be, why is it that we hold accelerators to a different standard? I mean, if you look at Silicon Valley, I'm assuming there are very few investors who are actually making decent returns, but there are a lot of VC funds. If you look at startups, there are very few startups that are actually going to ever return any of the money, but we don't say we have too many startups or too many investors. So why do we focus specifically on this one part of the ecosystem and say, that's too many? And to Mike's point, I would say that it's interesting. I agree that Silicon Valley has a lot of network and a cluster that's well developed, but it's also the case that Y Combinator started, the kind of definitive accelerator started in Silicon Valley. So doesn't that also suggest that accelerators can still play some role even in really developed clusters or ecosystems?
I think. Let's face it. Probably in every major ecosystem, there will be one decent accelerator, or maybe just they'll end up only being one left, because gradually, as entrepreneurs get better and better, they don't go to an accelerator when they're on their 3rd company. They just bring up their friend who funded them last time, and off they go. The accelerators seem to be much more valuable with graduates, and I think this is the thing: is that ecosystems that really want to really motor have to get people who are actually students right now doing their degree in computer science or maths or design or whatever it is, or marketing. They need to be involved even while they're still at school studying. Because otherwise it's kind of too late by the time they graduate. They've got to basically get involved. And that's where accelerators working with students, I think, have a role to play.
Actually, that's why we have been partners with American University in Cairo from the first day. Because actually, they not only provide us with the training for the entrepreneur, we also get access to their network of students. So we usually get the students as interns, they work with the companies, they do like case studies on our startups, and usually we get them later as entrepreneurs in the accelerator. So I totally agree with like the point of working with the student in general.
I mean, speaking of education, I mean, accelerators can be some way looked at almost as like a modern MBA, right? It's an MBA for entrepreneurs. Like, how do we get more of these students to take that leap, right? And I think accelerators can be, even if it's a totally shitty one, the way I see it is like, if entrepreneurs go through accelerator, starts a company, maybe that first company is a total failure. I'm interested in a second or third company, right? So maybe even shitty accelerators have a role in the ecosystem, right? I don't know, right?
Yeah, because you realize that whoever runs it is a crook. And then
You get beat up.
you tell your
Sure,
friends,
so, yeah.
and then nobody joins, and then they fail.
But it's exactly like, you know, the MBAs is exactly the same when you look at your MBA. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to this, you know, INSEAD or whatever. There are like 2 or 3 names of the like good MBAs, and they're like so shitty MBAs. So exactly, it's
We say
exactly
Phoenix
the
or
same.
DeVry. It's like, what the hell, right?
So if you go to an MBA just to go to an MBA, it's actually, you know, professional experience going to a few companies and doing shit is actually much better. And this is exactly the same for startups. If you do your startup and you fail and you learn constantly, and then actually you're going to be more successful for your next ventures. And what happens with this, you know, less good MBAs is that they don't just get the right people to run it. And it's exactly the same with the accelerators. You have people that are just on a salary, or they're being assigned because somebody in their organization or something decided that
This is what I'd like to ask Gary here, because corporate accelerators, Telefonica, now you've got a structural problem, because the people who run your accelerator aren't incentivized on the upside when a company exits or is sold or raises another round. I mean, how do you reconcile that?
Well, I mean, I do get some benefit to the extent that the startups actually raise more money. I mean, my KPIs or my bonus is completely dependent on the number of startups that raise funding. And I think that to the question about earlier about who's running the accelerator, if I'm an entrepreneur, I kind of feel vested, apart from the cash, in improving the ecosystem. So some of the benefit is also psychological. It's kind of like, I actually like being a part of the ecosystem. I like seeing startups raise money. I like to be able to say, I played a role in helping to create a company.
You like it when you're 80 and scraping together food to feed the cats?
Well, Telefonica plays quite well, so I won't be scraping together food. But I mean, apart from that, though, I think that I've changed careers every 5 years. I have no intention whatsoever in doing the same thing for the next 50 years. So the idea is this is just kind of one part of my path, but the same can be said of any entrepreneur. I don't know very many entrepreneurs that are doing the same thing for 10 years on end, or making decisions today based on what they expect to happen in 50 years.
Well, I see it actually for some of these people that are running these startups, I mean, these accelerators within the corporate structures or other kind of, you know, government-funded ones. It's actually a stepping stone to become like another career, right? So, you know what? In a year or two later, you might be leaving that company and maybe you're going to start your own fund, and now you're plugged into the ecosystem. So it's in some ways for some people just like bidding time, getting yourself plugged in, building your network, and then all of a sudden you can offshoot, start your own VC fund, or maybe you go out there and start your own company, now you're the most plugged in entrepreneur, right? So there are potential other benefits, but I agree, it does suck you don't guys get upside. Like for me, I would have never done it if I didn't have upside. I want to fucking, you know, have a piece, right? Yeah,
yes and no, because there are some people that are even so lazy they don't even go outside to, you know, their own city, and they don't even, you know, do this, you know, I'm going to build my network, I'm going to have like good connections, I'm going to connect with bigger VCs for my companies to help them, and then maybe one day I will need this for my own company. There are some people that are just sitting in their offices.
How would you guys talk about, like, what's the most ideal accelerator? Like, if you were going to create the perfect one, what would it look like?
Actually, it's interesting. I think this is the first panel I sit on where I think we have 2 moderators, which is amazing. That's amazing, actually.
Sorry.
That's really, actually a lot of energy. For
What's
me,
the answer?
yeah, just like the definition of success for an accelerator, and maybe we actually debate about this. Because like the way I see ourselves, I don't think from a financial perspective we're not successful yet. because like we don't have like exits that like have huge financial returns for us. And for us as a privately funded accelerator, like the only way that we make money is just like to exit and make this money again, some sort of like with the returns. So I would definitely define the ideal accelerator where it has successful exits, it has a huge network of support from the alumni and the graduates of the accelerator. Like I think Y Combinator has a great advantage in this, and we're trying to create as well like a network of alums and startups who would support the other startups who are joining the program, the new startup joining the program, and also where you can get the opportunities for a startup to access a new market or come up with a new idea to renovate their product again. So I think these, for me, like all of them are elements that would define a successful accelerator or an ideal accelerator.
Well, like YC was actually, people gave them a really hard time 2.5, 3 years ago, before kind of Airbnb and Dropbox kind of really popped out. They were saying, is YC ever going to be successful, right? So it took them like 6, 7 years to get to that stage. I think they're now almost 9 or 10 years, right? So it's going to take time, especially if you're in an emerging market. It's going to take even longer, right? So yeah, I think the jury's still out. But yeah, I think there will be a lot of crappy ones that will fall off, and I hope they die actually. But I think the ones will show time. I mean, it's kind of with VC funds, right? I mean, I won't know if I'm a good VC until 7, 8 years later, right? I mean, I have some winners in my portfolio, but I still don't even know, right? It's such a long delayed process, right?
If I have to add a few things about like the idea of accelerator, I would say that ideally accelerators should give a bit more money to the companies, not like 20K, 30K, but more like a bit more serious tickets. This is number one. Number two, this thing with like I'm giving you 80K, but actually you're giving me back 30K because I'm giving you services and shit. This is total crap. So whenever I see an accelerator like that,
we've given you a desk with a telephone.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're now going to take 5%
and we give you
equity.
access to our network.
You know why? It's a function because accelerators are still being jammed into the venture capital model where you have the 20% and then 2% model, right? So if they actually would break out of that model and say, hey, I'm going to have a lot more operational costs and that's baked into the fundraising of the accelerator, that would never exist. But that's the only way these guys can recoup the money, right? So they're like, hey, I have to find the money to pay for this. Yeah, but it's totally crap.
Yeah,
so
because sometimes
usually
that, right? It's integrated in the valuation, so they're like fake valuations created to companies because they raise more money, but actually they raise less money because some of the money were actually given back under the table or whatever.
Yeah, it's a sort of fake valuation.
Yeah.
One of the models I've seen in London develop recently is not an accelerator, but a kind of just a building basically with startups in it and another floor of angel investors and then another floor of maybe another a VC or something like that. So it actually feels like the ecosystem, but in microcosm, in one building instead of. So they're not really thinking about it like an accelerator, and the startups sort of basically mentor each other, as opposed to having to, they just rent a desk and then off they go.
Well, actually, that was like the biggest side effect I've seen from accelerators. Like, at first you think, okay, cool, they get money and they get access to mentors. But the biggest surprise I learned is that it's actually the companies helping each other out, right? It's because like, hey, I could tell you I ran a company, but last time I ran a company was 4 years ago. I actually don't know some of the newest stack and technology, or sometimes I actually don't even know some of the newest terms in the term sheets, right? But an entrepreneur's like, dude, I just did 3 months ago. Avoid this, do that, or like, that investor sucks, this guy's awesome. So actually that kind of community aspect is really important, right? But yeah, you want to also be rewarded to kind of build that community. That's why people, so yeah.
Also for some startups in the early stage, it's not really necessary to hire some people full-time. So, these shared resources is something that makes sense. For example, I have this designer, he's not on my payroll, he's not a co-founder, but he's great. And actually this designer can work with 5 or 6 companies because, in the early stage, you need designer for something, we're not like paying him full-time.
What do you guys think the role is for governments and accelerators? Because I see a lot of governments trying to start them or encourage them.
Stay away.
Stay away.
Stay away, please.
Run for the hills.
See, I disagree a little bit. I think that if they put the money and get the hell out of the way, it can be useful. Because in some of these places I've seen that no one's going to put money in, right? Because everyone's thinking, let's say an investor into an accelerator, they don't want to wait 7 to 10 years, but a government might, right? I think if they can put money, there is potential, right? But
you're talking about like something like Startup Chile or?
Yeah, well, Startup Chile is more like, it's non-profit for them, right? They give the money away, there's no equity taken. But I've seen other models where the government will put money as an investor, but it's kind of a wash. Like they say it's a loan, but it's a non-guaranteed loan, and they're going to lose all the money anyways. Or if you get upside, it goes all to you, and that actually then makes the model work.
But this
right?
this is typically dumb money versus smart money as well.
Of course, but it's better
still
have
money.
dumb money than having
it's
no
still
money.
money, yeah.
I'd rather
Yeah,
have
that's true,
money,
that's true.
right? Just give me any fucking money than no money. So I think
that-
something is important, right?
I think that the answer depends, though, on the ecosystem. So, like, for example, before I was in London, I was in Spain, and it was exactly what you were mentioning before. There's basically no kind of, like, private angel environment. They still had to change a lot of the laws in terms of incentivizing people to actually be willing to invest in startups. And in that sense, government is probably the only place that you can kind of get seed capital. In fact, it's probably easier to get the first seed capital than it is to get it in London right now. So I think in that sense, it can be really, really useful. But I then think that a startup has to understand that maybe you take this money because it's the only money that's available, but then you have to kind of figure out where it's best for you to situate yourself. So it may be the case that afterwards you need to kind of go to London, and after you go to London, it may be the case that you have to go to the US because the US is the only place to get enough money or to have access to exits or to sufficient liquidity. So I think it's about knowing where you need to be in every moment in time, and I don't think that there are any kind of blanket answers about government good or government bad. Government is good for a particular moment in particular contexts.
They should phase themselves out.
I think
technically.
I'd much rather have a government that put in proper policies, regulation, corporate law, allowing for the creation of companies quickly, the dissolution of companies if they fail quickly, easy bankruptcies, easy Chapter 11, so that you can move on, carry on, rather than governments trying to play in that space, because ultimately the kinds of people that they attract, like a government accelerator, these people are not very exciting people to be around. They're not the ones who you want to go drinking with at the end of the day after a big party.
I can give you an example. But like, for example, in Sofia now there is like a government project called Sofia Tech Park. It's an interesting thing. It's actually something that we really need. But on the other side, you know, when I see people running it, like the background of the lady in charge of it, she used to build the building. So they consider the tech park as something like a real estate project and not as an ecosystem project.
Government should put money into deep technology, right? You know, splitting the atom and education, and the rest of it they should probably stay away from.
Yeah, there's like 20, 30, 50-year projects, right? So
Actually, this is really interesting because before the revolution in Egypt, we had a government-backed accelerator or incubator. Actually, it was an incubator, not an accelerator. And the thing is that they were giving salaries to entrepreneurs, which was like a totally screwed up model. Like this is, yeah. And thank God, like after the revolution, they stopped.
Giving salaries
They didn't-
to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, which was really unbelievable. And after the revolution, actually, this is one good thing came out for the revolution, that they stopped doing this. And then we had the space to be able to like start Plastic Slabs and invest in startups. You can't compete with that. You can't compete with like free salaries and free money. This is like from my perspective, like an accelerator business.
So guys, I mean, kind of shifting track a little bit. I mean, you guys are running, pretty well-known accelerators in your guys' regions. What are surprises that you in running? Now you guys have been running for a couple of years each, I think, right? Like going into, you probably had a very different thought, and you were maybe more kind of, optimistic or something. What have you learned that's either bad or good that you kind of didn't expect when you started it?
The main learning for me at least is that it takes fucking long time, really long time. I want my startups to actually to grow faster, to act and execute faster, but it really takes a lot of time. So this was maybe the biggest bad surprise. And the good surprise is that we thought when we started that we're gonna have a call, we're gonna have a bunch of interesting companies, a bunch of good entrepreneurs, but then there will be like nothing, like a lake that there is no water anymore. But for a good surprise, it's like every time we do like a small event, like recruitment event, like we're looking for new startups, there is a pitching competition here or there. I go to Slovenia, for example. I think I've met every company that I know in Slovenia. I go to a pitching event, and they're like, out of 10 pitching, there are 8 new. So this is really cool.
So entrepreneurs are like a renewable resource almost, right?
Yeah. So actually, there are many of them still out there.
I think one of the things that we have learned after the first or 2 cycles in Plastic Slabs that we should pick the team, not the idea. Like, because the team stays, the idea
Say
changes.
that, you should say
This is
that again, I
100%
think.
true.
Say it again.
That, like, we learned after the first or 2 cycles of Plastic Slabs that we should, when we are selecting the startups, that we should select the team, not the idea. Because like in the first cycle, we called it cycle 0, we picked like great ideas we liked, but actually we didn't pay much attention to the team and like do background checks on them.
The reason, of course, is
The reason because like the team stays, the idea changes. Like they can share the market anytime, they can share the idea, they can pivot. but like the team stays with you. They are the entrepreneurs, they are the co-founders, especially in this stage, the early stage, that you can't really define success. You really can't see how it will look like after 2 or 3 years. So usually pick the team in like the very early stage of the investment.
No, this is the truth. At this stage especially, yeah, things are going to change. If you're writing a $20 million check, yeah, you have numbers, all this stuff. But yeah, at this stage, you are betting on the people 100%, right? So, Gary, anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that probably the biggest lesson for me from shifting from being an entrepreneur to working on the other side is to see that people are actually well-intentioned and there's actually kind of a role for everyone to play in the ecosystem. I think that probably entrepreneurs have to educate corporates and governments as to what exactly that role should be, but I don't think that we should kind of disincentivize them to try and play some sort of a role. So when I first got into Telefonica, I kind of assumed, that it was going to be a really shitty experience. I kind of really didn't have high expectations. And sometimes it kind of is. Sometimes there are kind of challenges there as well. But the same kind of challenges is when I actually had a startup. That was difficult on a day-by-day basis. So I don't think that difficulty or challenges should be the cause for not trying to do something. And I think I was kind of building in my head an analogy to like the civil rights struggle in the US, kind of random, but it was everyone had a role to play. You needed Malcolm X, you needed Martin Luther King, you needed government, you needed television, all of the different ecosystem players had a role to play in order to kind of foment any sort of real social change. I don't think social change is only going to come from entrepreneurs.
Nice. I think we have time for one more question. So guys, like you're in these markets, right, that aren't necessarily as robust as Silicon Valley. How much time do you guys have to actually spend educating investors and all the other people in the region? I mean, not only are you guys helping form the entrepreneurs, you guys are helping the whole system. So how much of your time is involved? Would you say 50-50 or, I mean, yeah, like just, you can complain now as much as you want. I mean, bring it on, right? So yeah.
That's totally true because, for example, for us, we need to do much more things. We need to educate angels. For example, a couple of years ago, we saw some companies where they got a very, very tiny investment by an angel, but it was like for 30 or 40% equity in the company. So we need to explain to angels how to invest. We need to actually create and gather this angel community. We need to fly over, because Sofia is not the Valley or London, so we need to fly over constantly people and to mingle them with the local community and with our startups. So we're also into events. So one of my part was actually making a joke. We're actually not a fund. We're like an event company.
Kind of like a travel agency inviting people in. Come to my country, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, you had the Rise Up Summit, and people came together to create that in Cairo. And you can't really beat physically meeting people, can you? Staring them in the whites of their eyes and actually getting together. I don't think that really, that's the irony of technology, especially in startups, is you've still got to work with people.
Actually, we didn't train angel investors before because I don't think it works. But usually they are resistant to someone training them or telling them what to do or where to invest their money. And there might be a conflict of interest there because we are already investors in the startups. So we usually support them. We try to be close with them. We try to see what they are looking for and start selecting startups based on their criteria because they are our customer after all. We produce startups that they invest in. So we usually engage with them. We usually ask them what they are looking for now. And what we do also that we try to match their funds. We have a small fund on the side where if any investor comes in and they invest in a company and there's we can do some kind of a bridge for the startup so we can encourage more investors to come in and invest in the startups.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is it depends again on the market. So in Spain, for example, we had to spend a lot of time helping to educate the ecosystem. In London, we don't have that same challenge. I think the challenge is very different. It's much more about trying to see if we can help startups get into the US because that's where they're all looking for their next fundraise or 2 raises down the line.
Cool. I mean, so I think in summary, what we really talked about, accelerators are going to be here, but a lot of them will die. Well, hopefully the crappy ones do die, right? 2, I mean, it's all about the entrepreneur and the team. The idea at this stage does not matter. So once again, if you love somebody, you think these guys and girls are working together perfectly, put the money in, things will evolve. And then 3, really important, everyone here has a role. Every single one of you, be it your leader or you're holding the sign, walking down and protesting, you guys could go out there and really encourage. I mean, even with an entrepreneur, just give them a hug. If they're having this, it's all this support helps.
I think that's a startup, actually. So hugs.com.
Exactly.
I think we could monetize that.
I'm sure somebody needs some tender care, right? So, but yeah, okay. Thanks, guys. And thanks, guys, for being on the panel.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers.